Were you born in Nelson?
I was born in Roslyn, February the 2nd, 1902. My father was working at the time for the Puerto Rico Lumber Company at Weimar. They were going to set up a retail yard, lumber yard in Roslyn, but what they called in those days the panic, which was a depression, occurred, and they changed their plans and moved Dad. They closed the yard up there, and their effort so far, and Dad and Mother, and at that time me, as a baby, went back to Weimar, and then 6 months later moved to Nelson. And Dad finally bought the retail yard of the Puerto Rico Lumber Company, and right across from the Civic Center, on the parking lot, the location of it is on the corner of Hall and Vernon, and right where the parking lot is for the Super Value store. Mm-hmm. You know, right across the street, and across Hall Street from the medical clinic.
Was your father experienced in the lumber business?
He was a carpenter by trade, really. He came out in 1890, late 96 or 97, to Nelson. They were going through to Portland, and he changed his plans here and stayed in Nelson and never did go to Portland. However,
was he coming from the prairies?
Where?
Where was he coming from?
Ontario. He was born in Newmarket, just out of Toronto. But they moved here from a little place called Thornbury, near the city of Meaford, on the eastern shore of Lake Huron. In between that and Ottawa, you know, mm-hmm. in that area.
When did your father first engage in sawmilling?
1905. He bought a little mill that was up at Willow Point, and moved it to Taghum, and everything with horses, and as much as possible on snow, you know, for tractive purposes. And there was 7 sawmill sites built from Taghum itself up to the head of Sproule Creek. The main fork was 8 miles back from Taghum. And the one I worked in the most and the longest was the top mill, 8 miles from the Taghum station. The old Taghum crossing.
Did you move the mill up the creek as you cut the timber?
Eh?
Why did you move the mill up the creek as you cut the timber?
As the timber was cut, the movement of the mill followed the logging of the area, and finally it cut its way out of timber at the top end at 8 miles up. It was right on the summit. You see, you could look down into the Slocan Valley, down Labadoo Creek. However, there's no logging or sawmilling going on up Sproule Creek now. There was 62 million feet of lumber sawn, and not 1 foot of it was brought out on wheels. It was all flumed out in the water from Sproule Creek. It was a successful fluming operation. Under the best conditions, we could flume out 40,000 feet of lumber in a 9-hour day down that 8 miles. That's a history in itself. The fluming of lumber and logs.
Did you flume the logs to the mill, and then did you also use a flume?
Well, we skidded what was close, and then as the timber got further from the mill, because the mill was a steam mill and a permanent setting, and once put in place, and then you built the flumes to suit the position of the mill, and with a mill dam, there was 9 men in the mill. No, 11 men. I did 9 jobs out of 11 in that mill, the top mill.
Did your father's logging company or lumber company also buy logs from other places, or did you supply all your own logs?
They didn't buy logs. They bought stocks of lumber that were either up for sale at a bargain or bankruptcy or on the part of the other fella. There was, at that time, way back in 1920, there was 150 sawmills between Grand Forks and Crowsnest. 150 working sawmills.
How many board feet a day could your mill cut at Sproule Creek?
The most it ever cut was about 36,000, 37 maybe, 38 or 9. It was built to do 40,000 feet a day, and it probably would have under the right circumstances as far as water supplies and log supply. But it never quite reached its potential. And that wasn't a bad factor either. That is, you're always grabbing for that next 1 foot or 2 feet more on the tally board at the end of the day.
Well, I wonder if I could ask you now a little bit about Kaslo.
Well, yes, you can. Go ahead.
Why did you pick Kaslo as a site for your mill?
Because there was 1,200 Japanese removed from the coast, and amongst them there was a lot of sawmill and a lot of men that were experienced in connection with jobs that had relation to the lumber business. That was mainly the reason why I chose it.
Had you already closed the mill at Sproule Creek?
Huh?
Had your mill already closed?
Oh, yeah, it closed in 1933. But this didn't start till 1943. This was a wartime effort on my part. See, that we were right in the middle of the war then, in 1943. And I was determined that bugger Hitler wasn't going to win that damn war if I could help stop him.
How long did you operate the mill at Kaslo?
10 years. From 1943 to 1953.
Was it in the bay?
Yeah, right in the bay. Yeah, that's it.
Were there buildings there from the old Buchanan sawmill?
No, there was one building that had been an office building that was still there when we took the property over. This was taken on that little bluff, looking back down at the front end of the sawmill, you know.
So this was your head saw in here?
Hey?
Is that the head saw?
Oh, hell no. A head saw is right in the mill, in the front end of the mill. Unless you know something about sawmilling, there's no use of trying to describe it all. These logs were logs that came from both across from Kaslo and from the Lardo. We ended up by dealing with an outfit in an outfit from Kamloops. On the pile on the right-hand side, there's a green covered. Yeah.
Is this S.J. Smith?
Yeah.
Is that it?
H.J., isn't it?
Yeah, I can't tell from that.
He became Senator Smith.
Was he an American?
No, he was Canadian.
From Kamloops?
Yeah, but he was from the prairie originally.
Did you run your own logging camps?
Said Smith. S.J. Sidney J. Smith.
Did you run your own logging camps?
Well, under foreman, yes.
And you had timber in the Lardo Valley?
Well, the Lardo Valley had been scalped pretty thoroughly before we ever got monkeying into it in the 40s. It was, there's been millions of feet taken out since then, but by different methods and different machinery and different knowledge of how to do things, and see, they did away with the railway in the Lardo Valley, and that made one hell of a difference to it.
Why did it make a difference for logging?
Well, one thing it did do was open up the ability of the individual with his own piece of equipment to move from one place to another to suit himself, you know, and that is, you get in your car and you drive 50 miles and think nothing of it. And when the railroad was there, it hampers you. The damn thing is in the road, and you're subject to their methods of doing things, you know.
Mm-hmm. The sawmill in Kaslo, how much could you cut in a shift?
Our mill?
Yes.
Oh, it was only a little mill, 25,000 feet a day, in an 8-hour day, though.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a planer?
Yeah, I built a planing plant, and it didn't get into operation until 1948 or 9, just at the end of the war.
Who did you ship your lumber to?
It went to an eastern outfit in Burlington, Ontario called Nicholson and Cates.
Were they a broker?
No, James R. Nicholson, Nicholson and Sons was the biggest sash and door factory in eastern Canada at that time, and Nicholson became the timber controller for Canada for 2 or 3 years during the war, while we were dealing with them. Ours was a small operation. They had 2 or 3 operations going.
What did you ship them? What kind of wood?
Everything that grew on trees. And they shipped the most of it in the rough.
Did they take most everything you produced?
They took everything. We sawed to their order and specifications. They were near Hamilton, Ontario. Burlington.
You would load them into box cars in Kaslo?
Yes, and on flat cars. A lot of our stuff moved on flat cars.
Did it have to be air dried for a while before you shipped it?
Oh, sometimes it was on the car, loaded and on its way to eastern Canada inside of 3 hours from the time it was standing timber. It was a hurry-up job because there was just one war to win, and that was the World War.
Why did you close the mill in 1953?
Bankruptcy. We were squeezed into a corner by 3 big outfits. One in Chicago, and the Kootenay Forest here in Nelson, and the a pole company in Chicago.
How did they do that?
Well, you have to know something about the bloody business of financing on a shoestring.
Did they bid up the timber sales?
Well, there's no use of you and I going into the business of how business contracts are maneuvered, and you see, there's nothing static in the damn thing. Sorry to say, what did they do? Bid the timber up on you? Well, that's a stupid question, because where do you start from and where do you stop? It's that is, outfits that are in opposition to each other in an area bid against each other just in a regular auction sale, and it can end up at anything. It can break one or the other, or be their blessing. But hell, I'm not going to start to recount the whole running of a lumber company. In 1948 or 9, we had 50 men on the payroll, and 3 logging camps, sawmill, planing mill, yard crew. And I didn't work very hard. I only worked 14 hours a day.